The morning began like a whisper, too quiet for comfort. If you have ever walked into an office and immediately sensed that something was wrong, you will know the exact weight pressing against my chest that day. The glass towers of New York caught the first touch of sunlight, glowing gold against a pale September sky, and inside those towers people moved with the usual rhythm of corporate life. Yet the 12th floor of Ravenwell Technologies felt different, heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I remember placing my coffee down on the corner of my desk and staring at the soft steam curling up toward the ceiling. It should have been a morning of triumph. We were less than 2 hours away from the most important product launch in the history of our partnership with Meridian Global Financial. Years of planning, millions of dollars invested, months of sleepless nights ensuring the code ran flawlessly and the systems aligned like constellations in the night sky. On my monitor, a neat row of green indicators pulsed in unison. Each one was a heartbeat, proof that the system was alive. Data streams were flowing, load balancers were distributing requests with precision, backups stood ready to take over in case of failure. To most people in the office, those tiny lights were meaningless. To me, they were poetry. They were stability. They were the culmination of 3 years of my life, 3 years spent learning the skeleton of an architecture everyone else avoided because it was too messy, too old, too fragile. I leaned back in my chair for a moment, letting the hum of servers wash over me. It was a sound I had grown addicted to, a sound that told me everything was working exactly as it should. And yet, beneath that steady hum, I felt a different current, an unnatural stillness in the air, the absence of casual chatter, the way my colleagues' eyes slid away from mine as if contact might burn them. That was when I noticed the blinds. Victor Hale's office blinds were drawn shut. For anyone else, that detail might have been meaningless, but for Victor, it was a declaration of war. He thrived on visibility. He wanted people to see him, to watch him, to know that he was in control. Closing the blinds meant he was hiding something, pulling strings in the dark. I turned my gaze back to my screen, though my pulse had already quickened. Shadows shifted under the thin gap at the bottom of Victor's door. Muffled voices murmured, quick and sharp. I could not make out the words, but the cadence was urgent, and in the corporate world, closed-door meetings before 9 in the morning rarely carried good news. By 9:20, the door opened, and the man himself emerged. Victor Hale carried himself with the sharpness of a blade freshly polished. His shoes struck the floor like a metronome, each step echoing authority he believed was unquestionable. Mid-40s, silver hair immaculately styled, his suit tailored within an inch of its life, Victor projected the kind of confidence that came not from knowledge, but from the certainty that he could bend others to his will. His smile, when he bothered to use it, was a weapon, a blade hidden behind charm. But this morning he did not smile. He walked straight toward me. The office grew even quieter. Fingers hovered above keyboards but did not press down. My colleagues performed the pantomime of productivity, but I could feel their attention, every single pair of eyes fixed on this moment. I had been in the spotlight before, presenting technical breakdowns to executives, briefing clients in high-stakes meetings, even handling emergency outages that threatened millions. But nothing had ever felt like this. Victor stopped at my desk. He did not sit, did not lean down to soften his presence. He stood tall, casting his shadow across my screens, and delivered the order that would unravel everything. Shut down your workstation, effective immediately. For a second, my brain refused to process the words. Shut down? It was absurd, like telling a pilot to cut the engines mid-flight. The green lights on my monitor blinked at me innocently, unaware that their survival depended on me refusing. I blinked, slowly buying time. I am sorry, Victor. What exactly did you say? His voice carried across the floor, sharp and deliberate. You heard me. Shut down your workstation. Log out of all systems. This is a direct order. Around me, the silence thickened. I felt the blood drain from my face, felt the rush of adrenaline flood every vein. He could not be serious. Victor, I said carefully, my voice even despite the panic clawing at the edges of my thoughts. The Meridian launch is in less than 2 hours. If I shut down my workstation now, the live feed will disconnect. Reinitialization requires at least 3 hours, assuming every security protocol runs perfectly. We will not have a functioning platform for the launch. His expression did not soften. If anything, it hardened. I am not asking for your technical explanation. I am giving you a command. Do it now. The weight of those words pressed on me like a stone. This was not ignorance. This was intentional. Victor wanted me to fail. He wanted me gone. I could almost see the strategy unfolding in his head. Fire me in the middle of chaos, let the system collapse, and use the fallout to seize total control of the department. He thought he was brilliant. He thought he had outmaneuvered me. But arrogance always leaves blind spots. I opened my email, fingers steady now despite the storm inside me. If he wanted me cornered, I would document the corner. My hands flew across the keys. Per your verbal instruction at 9:22 a.m., I am to immediately shut down my workstation. Please confirm this order. Note that this action will terminate the Meridian Live Feed connection approximately 90 minutes before their product launch. I copied HR and hit send. His jaw twitched. I do not have time for your games. This is a direct verbal order. Are you refusing to comply? He had set the trap, and I was walking straight into it. If I refused, I would be fired with cause. No severance, no benefits. My career blackened with insubordination. But if I obeyed, the consequences would not fall on me alone. The entire company would pay. Meridian would pay. Billions could be frozen in an instant. The office was watching. They might not meet my eyes, but I knew they were listening. Every heartbeat of silence confirmed that this was not just my fight. I opened the audit log system, ensuring the microphone picked up my words. For the record, I said clearly, you want me to shut down my workstation immediately, knowing that this will disconnect the Meridian Live Feed system. Yes, immediately. How many times do I need to repeat myself? I typed the confirmation into the log, time-stamped at 9:24 a.m. My heart pounded against my ribs, but my voice was calm. Understood. My fingers hovered above the keys. A part of me screamed to resist, to stand up, to shout that this was madness. Another part whispered the truth. Sometimes the best way to win is to follow the order exactly as given. I pressed the command. One by one, the green indicators vanished. The rhythmic pulse stopped. The hum of the system dulled into emptiness. In an instant, the lifeline I had guarded for years flatlined. Victor exhaled slowly, as though savoring a victory. Good. Now pack your things. Your employment here is terminated, effective immediately. HR will email you the details. He expected devastation. He expected me to crumble. He wanted tears, pleas, broken pride. Instead, I packed my belongings into a small cardboard box, a mug, a cactus, a framed photo of a team that no longer existed. When I stood, I looked him straight in the eye. I have complied with your direct order to shut down my workstation at 9:24 a.m., 90 minutes before the Meridian launch. It has been logged in the system. I hope you have a backup plan. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. Only for a heartbeat, then it vanished under arrogance. That is no longer your concern. Security will escort you out. Tom from security appeared at my side, professional but uneasy. Together we walked to the elevator. The office remained silent, but I could feel their eyes burning holes in my back. When the doors closed, I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. He thought he had destroyed me. What he had actually done was hand me the perfect weapon, and I would use it. Tom and I rode down in silence. The elevator hummed like a throat clearing before a verdict. When the doors opened to the marble lobby, the building's chill hit my face. I thanked Tom, more out of habit than need. He nodded and looked like he wanted to say something but could not. People rarely know what to say to someone who has just been erased. Outside, the city moved with its usual indifference. Taxis flashed by. Steam rose from a vent in the sidewalk. A courier balanced 3 coffees like a street performer. I crossed to the corner cafe that had saved me through 100 late nights and 1,000 bitter thoughts. The bell over the door chimed at my arrival, and Marcus looked up from the espresso machine with the kind of surprise that belongs to family. "Evan," he said, because only Marcus called me that. "You are early." "Something like that," I said. I placed the cardboard box on the end table by the window, the one that gave me a clean line of sight into Ravenwell's glass stomach. "Can I get a cappuccino? Extra shot?" He nodded, eyes flicking to the box, then back to me. He did not ask. That was another reason I liked him. I chose the corner booth that felt like a theater seat. My hands moved without thinking. Laptop out, privacy screen up, phone to silent, a breath in, slow and steady. Through the glass, I could see the 12th floor like an aquarium. Figures flashed past the windows, people with clipboards, people with fear in their shoulders. Someone stood with both hands pressed to the glass as if answers were etched on the street below. Marcus set the cup beside me. The foam was perfect, a white island on a brown sea. "On the house," he said, "for whoever wins the day." "Thank you," I said. I wrapped my hands around the warmth and watched my old world begin to shake itself apart. 10:45. Classic pre-launch parade. Executives with tight jaws striding toward war rooms. a cluster gathering by the main conference room. I zoomed the phone camera a little inside the cafe and snapped a photo for myself. The image caught the exact moment when people stop pretending things are fine. It looks like a stumble in the air. My laptop awoke with a blue sigh. I opened a tidy folder on my desktop. The names of the files looked boring, which was exactly how I wanted them to look. A screenshot of the audit log, a backup of my risk assessment, a recording captured from my desk phone that followed policy to the letter. Documentation is a ritual. People think it is about memory. It is not. It is armor. 10:51. Victor reappeared in the lobby, coffee in hand, a calm swing in his step as if he had just closed a minor deal on printer paper. He checked his watch and took a slow sip. I could read that posture from a mile away. He believed the narrative was locked, believed the script would follow his words the way doors obey a key. He stepped out to the curb, made a call, laughed. He did not look up at my window. Predators rarely check the trees. 11 o'clock. There is a sound that offices make when something breaks in the exact second that no one expects. It is not an alarm. It is not a scream. It is a sudden hollow where air should be. The glass facade of Ravenwell seemed to inhale. People who had been walking now ran. Someone in a navy suit started answering 3 phones at once. A woman from legal appeared at the front desk with a face like a new storm. I sipped my cappuccino and watched the ripples race outward. My body felt oddly light. Shock does that. It empties the limbs while sharpening the mind. I remembered the first time I learned what a system failure feels like. It was not fear that bothered me. It was the loneliness of knowing exactly what is happening while everyone else is still guessing. Today I was alone in a new way. I was out. I was free. I was holding a match and a bucket of water at the same time. My phone buzzed. I turned it face down, then up again. Curiosity always wins. Sarah, what happened? Are you okay? Did he really? Another message. Meridian platform non-responsive. Trading windows frozen. Senior leadership in full panic. I typed and erased 3 responses, then I left the screen blank. There would be time for answers. There would be time for mercy too. 11:07. A black car braked hard by the curb. Patricia stepped out without waiting for the driver to open the door. I had worked with her for years. I had seen her stay calm through a 12-hour outage that would have broken a lesser leader. Today her calm had a crack in it. She moved fast without appearing to run. In my chest, something like hope pressed against my ribs. I opened the audit log screenshot and checked the time stamp. 9:24. I replayed the audio through my headphones. Victor's voice was clear and cold. The words were simple. Shut down your workstation. Effective immediately. My own voice in response had the trained evenness of a person counting heartbeats. I listened to the click when my fingers executed the final command. Proof is not just for courts. Proof is for your own memory when doubt tries to rewrite the past. 11:15. 2 more cars. A man with a face I recognized from client briefings stepped out and adjusted his cuff. That was Meridian Legal. The way they moved was all blade and no silk. Behind them arrived another sedan with a familiar figure whose jaw did not know the shape of a smile. Richard Brennan, Meridian's chief architect of consequences. When he entered a building, something had gone very wrong. My phone buzzed again. A short line from an unknown number. Are you nearby, Patricia? Of course she would find a way. I looked across the street. For a second our eyes met through the layers of glass and sun glare and distance. She lifted her hand once, a small motion that could have meant anything. I did not lift mine. Not yet. 11:23. The first press alert popped up on a business site with too many headlines. I skimmed, then closed it. I already knew more than the article could offer. Another message from Sarah. Brennan is in the room. Victor looks like his soul is trying to escape through his shirt collar. I almost smiled. I should not have. Smiling at collapse feels cruel. But then I remembered the way Victor had watched me pack the photo of my team. Cruelty rarely deserves sympathy. I opened a blank document and began to draft a simple timeline. No flourishes, no commentary, just times and facts. I wrote the moment I arrived, the verification checks I completed, the exact green lights that were visible at 9:19, the arrival of Victor, the command, the refusal to confirm by email, the threat of an escort, the execution of Shutdown, the termination, the leaving. 11:29. The cafe had filled during the last 20 minutes. Office workers smelling smoke drifted toward the nearest window with coffee in hand. A couple argued gently about whether to go back to their building because their manager might need them. The world kept moving. Across the street in a glass hive, a single decision had begun to burn through layers of paper and pride. My phone rang. Patricia. I let it buzz once more, then answered. "Where are you?" she asked, and her voice was steady again in a way that made me respect her all over. "Across the street," I said. "Window seat, cafe with the blue awning. We need you here now." "I cannot," I said. "I was terminated. I have no authorization to touch your systems." Silence. I could hear small voices behind her and the soft stutter of fingers on a conference room table. "I understand," she said. "Will you stay there for a moment?" "Yes." She hung up. I set the phone beside my cup and watched the 12th floor. People moved like a weather map in fast forward. I took another sip. The foam had disappeared. The coffee had cooled. It was still good. I remembered the first time I believed I was safe here. It was after a crisis the previous year. A vendor had pushed a patch that looked harmless and turned out to be a grenade. I had stayed all night to find the one line of code that cut the right wire. When the sun rose, Patricia had walked into the server room without makeup and with the kind of calm that belongs to people who have earned it. She had put a hand on my shoulder. Only 2 seconds. Nothing dramatic. Then she had said, "You are the person I trust." I had gone home that morning believing trust could be a shield. Today I knew better. Trust is not a shield. It is a tool. It can be used to build or to break. 11:41. A message arrived while I watched a cluster of suits sprint through the lobby. It was an internal legal address I recognized from training sessions. "MS Craig, please return to the building at once as a temporary contractor for stabilization under executive authorization. You will be compensated at an emergency rate. You will have full access restored upon arrival. Please reply with acceptance." I read the lines twice. I opened my other folder and glanced at the contract template I kept for one reason only, and that reason had just arrived. I typed a simple reply. "I will come if the following conditions are met." I listed them. Emergency rate triple my previous hourly compensation. Written apology for the termination that had no cause. A statement of restored status pending investigation. Full operational authority for the purpose of stabilization. A commitment to a review of decision protocols once the crisis ended. I kept the list short. Clarity is not about quantity, it is about precision. 11:45. Patricia called again. "Accepted," she said. There was a different sound in her voice now, not relief, command. "Please come straight to the executive conference room. Security has been notified." "I will need a quiet space to work," I said, "and 3 engineers I name." "Done." I closed the laptop and finished the coffee in 3 long swallows. My hands had stopped shaking. I picked up the box with the cactus and the photo frame with its old smile and the mug that had seen me through more nights than I cared to count. Marcus met me at the counter. "Go," he said. "Add it to my tab," I said. He shook his head. "You can pay me when the lights turn green again." I crossed the street through a flash of sirens and a gust of wind that tasted like rain. The lobby guard looked up with a start, then pressed a button under the desk. The elevator opened as if it had been waiting. I rode up alone. For a second, the mirror in the panel caught my face, and I stared at the woman looking back at me, a woman who had just lost everything and yet felt taller than she had that morning. The executive floor smelled like sharpened pencils and serious money. A security officer I did not know led me to the conference room. When the door opened, the heat inside hit me like stepping into a crowded train. People at the table, people along the walls, laptops open, cables like vines, Patricia at the head. David Reynolds to her left, looking like granite learns to scowl. On the screen, a video window with Brennan's face framed by the harsh light of a New York office. All eyes shifted to me. That is a kind of power I had never sought. I stood near the end of the table and set the box at my feet. "MS Craig," David said, "we need to understand what happened." "What happened," Brennan said, louder than the speaker needed, "is that my platform died at launch and my board wants a head." I nodded once. "Then let us begin with facts." I connected my phone to the large display. The audit log filled the screen. I spoke without hurry, the way you speak when you know the ground will hold. I showed the timestamp of Victor's order. I played the audio captured by the desk system that our policy required us to use when verbal commands involved production systems. Victor's voice was unmistakable. I showed the email I sent at 9:22. I read the line I had written about the consequences. I displayed the green indicators from 9:19. I let the room absorb the sequence, not just the data but the logic, the way cause becomes effect. Victor sat at the far end, not quite meeting my eyes. His tie was slightly crooked in a way I had never seen. People who control the room do not like losing even the symmetry of their clothing. "That is taken out of context," he said. "Context," I said quietly, "is the architecture you refused to learn." Patricia lifted a hand. "Evan, can you restore the system?" "Yes," I said. "I will need full access. I will need Sarah and Kumar and James. I will need 2.5 hours without interference. And I will need a workroom. It would be helpful if that room is the office at the end of the hall." Patricia glanced at David. He nodded without looking away from me. "Granted," he said. Then to Victor, he added, "Out." The single word landed like a stamp on wet clay. Security stepped forward. Victor started to speak, then stopped. He stood, gathered his phone, placed it back down as if he had just remembered something, and walked out. The door shut behind him with the quietest click I had ever heard. Sometimes quiet is louder than a slam. I turned back to the table. "I am going to bring your platform back," I said to Brennan's face on the screen. "But the reinitialization sequence takes a minimum of 3 hours if we follow every security protocol. I can shorten it. I can do it safely. I will give you a running system in 2 hours and 20, possibly a little less." Brennan leaned toward the camera. "You do that, and you will have whatever you ask for." "I already asked," I said. "And your counsel accepted." That almost made him smile. I picked up the box. Patricia stepped out into the hall with me. "You were right," she said, "about everything." "I tried to tell him," I said. "I know." She did not touch my arm. She did not need to. "Take my assistant. Take the corner office. It is empty." I walked into Victor's office and set the box on his polished desk. The city hung in the window like a living map. For a second, I allowed myself to imagine the night ahead when the lights would be green again and the noise would return to an ordinary pitch. Then I picked up the phone and started calling my team. Sarah arrived first, breathless and furious. "He fired you," she said. "For a moment," I said. "We have work to do." Kumar came next with a notebook that held more process maps than any brain should. James followed with a cable pouch and a grin so tight it looked painful. I handed out tasks as easily as breathing. The rhythm of triage returned. I felt like a conductor who already knew every mistake the orchestra might make and had planned the corrections before the music began. We built a clean bridge for the live feed to walk across. We purged corrupted handshakes. We reissued tokens. We cleared caches without touching the integrity of the logs. We ran the race sync in phases and set watchers to scream at us if any sequence tried to leap ahead. At some point, Patricia brought coffee and left without speaking. At some point, a junior engineer brought sandwiches we did not eat. At some point, I saw the message from legal confirming the temporary consultant status and the apology letter attached that read like medicine. I did not open it. I knew what it would say. Words are useful. Actions are better. My hands moved through commands that had become a second language. The clock on the wall was a drum. The team called out steps and confirmations. We checked each other. Trust here was not a feeling. Trust here was a practice. 2 hours and 17 minutes after I opened the laptop in the cafe, green lights bloomed across 3 dashboards at once like spring after a brutal winter. I stood still and let the moment sit inside me. Then I called the war room. "We are live," I said. "Full integrity, monitoring stable. You will see normal latency for the next 4 minutes as the buffers equalize." I heard the exhale of a dozen people through the speaker. Brennan's voice came back a moment later. It sounded different now. Respect has a sound when it arrives for the first time. "Thank you," he said. "Do not go anywhere." I hung up and leaned my palms on the desk. The city outside had the same shape it had that morning, but it did not look the same. Crisis changes the light. Sarah touched the edge of the cactus pot with a fingertip and laughed for the first time that day. "He could not even kill your plant," she said. "Nothing that easy survives here by accident," I said. The door opened and Jennifer from legal stepped in with a folder that looked heavy enough to bruise a table. "Documentation," she said. "We will need everything you have. Also, there is something you should see." She laid out a series of printed emails. I scanned them and felt the floor tilt in a new direction. There were references to vendors Victor had chosen, money just under thresholds, backups that he pushed through with urgent signatures. On another sheet, a thread with a contact at a competitor. The words were careful, the substance was not. I looked up. "We will talk about this after the system is safe," I said. Jennifer nodded. "The system is safe," she said. "Now we talk." Not yet, I thought. Not yet. There is a time for documenting and a time for revealing. I would choose both times. I always did. I dismissed the team to get water and stretch and to feel for 5 minutes the pride they had earned. I closed the door and opened a new window on the screen. The recovery had gone exactly as planned. The chaos had followed a pattern so neat that even a person who refuses to learn could understand it. And inside that pattern, something else moved. A shadow where there should have been light. a set of modifications to the backup topology that looked like housekeeping and smelled like a secret door. I stared at the configuration long enough to memorize it. Then I saved a copy. Then a second copy in a secure drive only legal could touch. I did not yet know what I would find at the end of that tunnel. I only knew this. The shutdown order was not the only way Victor had tried to win, and if there was one hidden door, there could be more. Outside the office, the executive floor had shifted into a relieved babble. People laughed too loudly. Someone clapped and then stopped when no one joined in. The air had a sugar rush quality. Across the street, I imagined Marcus polishing a cup and telling someone that the woman in the corner seat had left with her head higher than she had arrived. I shut my eyes for a second and let the quiet in the room settle like dust. He thought I would break. He thought I would beg. He believed an order could erase the person who understood the system better than anyone else. He was wrong. I opened my eyes and watched the green lights breathe. The system was alive again. I was alive again. And although they did not know it yet, the real story had not started with the shutdown. It had started with something far more dangerous that was still hidden inside our network like a fuse waiting for a spark. I reached for my phone to call Jennifer back. I stopped with my fingertips on the glass. Not yet. The evidence would be there tomorrow and the next day. It would be there for as long as I needed. Tonight I would write the full timeline before memory tried to sand away the edges. Tonight I would review the access logs and the vendor contracts and the curious way a certain server requested attention on the exact nights Victor stayed late and pretended to care about engineers. Tonight I would collect the threads. Then I would pull them. For now, I placed the cactus on the window ledge where the sun could find it. I set the photo face down. I stood very still in the office that had been used as a throne, and I listened to the hummingbird sound of the live feedback at work. Part 1 of this story did not end with panic in a lobby or a door closing on my career. Part 1 ended here, in the moment after the lights return, when you feel the floor under you and you know the next step will be the one that changes everything. I smiled at the city. The glass smiled back. The day unraveled faster than even I could have imagined. When I left the building with my box of belongings pressed against my chest, I expected chaos to brew, yes, but I thought it might simmer for an hour before boiling over. I underestimated just how delicate the balance really was. I had barely settled into the booth at the cafe when the clock ticked past 10 and the first ripples of collapse spread across Ravenwell. I could see them even from across the street, silhouettes darting from desk to desk, the frantic pacing of managers, the sudden increase in people clutching their phones like lifelines. By 10:20, the ripples had become waves. I could read panic in posture alone. The engineers bent low over their monitors, shoulders drawn up like shields. The executives leaned too far forward as if proximity to the glass would grant them answers. My old teammates texted me nonstop. The feed is down. Victor is pretending everything is normal. What do we do? I typed no response. Words are easy to spend. I had learned to save them for the right moment. 10:30 arrived, and with it the first serious signs of unraveling. The client's monitoring systems had clearly flagged the disconnection. Their operations teams would already be on high alert, scrambling to reconnect to a feed that no longer existed. I imagined their conference room filled with red status lights, executives pacing in suits more expensive than their patients. Victor had disappeared, probably gone for his ritual pre-meeting espresso 2 blocks away. That, I thought with a bitter kind of amusement, was Victor's genius. To set fire to a room and then step outside for fresh air while the smoke filled everyone else's lungs. At 10:45, he reappeared in the lobby, coffee in hand, face glowing with smug calm. He walked like a man who believed the story was already written. His confidence was a performance, but one his audience never dared question. I sat at my booth with my cappuccino cooling, watching his reflection ripple on the cafe window. For all his control, he never looked up. He never considered that the one person he thought erased could still be here, still watching, still documenting. Predators rarely check the branches above them. 11 o'clock struck. There are few sounds in the world as distinctive as an office in collapse. It is not the sound of alarms or sirens. It is the sudden absence of normalcy. The hum of small talk silenced, the rhythm of typing broken, the shuffle of papers replaced by sharp, staccato footsteps. The glass facade of Ravenwell seemed to pulse, as though the building itself realized its blood supply had been cut. By 11:05, the lobby filled with faces I had never seen move so quickly. Junior associates stumbled under the weight of binders they never thought they would need. Security guards clustered near entrances, speaking rapidly into radios. Phones rang so often that the sound blurred into a single endless note. And then the black cars arrived. The first screeched to a halt outside, tires protesting on concrete. Out stepped Patricia, the woman who had once placed her trust in me like a shield. She was composed, but even across the street I could see the tension in her jaw, the slight tremor in her usually steady stride. She almost ran through the glass doors, and that was enough to tell me how dire things had become. 11:15 brought 2 more sedans. I recognized the faces immediately. Meridian's legal team, moving like sharks scenting blood. They carried briefcases, but they may as well have been carrying knives. A third car arrived, and the man who emerged needed no introduction. Richard Brennan, Meridian's CEO, his expression was not rage, it was something colder, heavier, like a man cataloging the cost of betrayal. Inside the building, people scattered, rearranged, gathered in huddles like prey animals sensing the predator had stepped into the clearing. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Patricia. "Where are you? We need you here now." I stared at the message until my reflection blurred on the darkened screen. Then I typed the truth. "I cannot. I was terminated." "I have no authorization." The reply came quickly. "Stay where you are." I leaned back into the booth and let the message settle. The system was dead. The launch had failed. And the one man who thought he had written the ending was about to learn what it felt like when the script turned against him. The fall had begun. The cafe filled with lunchtime chatter that had nothing to do with the disaster across the street. A group of students argued about film theory. An old man read his newspaper with lips pursed. Someone laughed too loudly at a joke I could not hear. It all felt surreal, like the world had decided to move on while one corner of it crumbled into dust. Inside Ravenwell's walls, though, time was bleeding out. I could see it in the gestures, in the way people gestured wildly toward screens, in the way executives abandoned their polished masks. The 12th floor had become an aquarium of panic. I knew that feeling intimately. I had lived through smaller failures before, the kind that made your chest tight until you found the single missing semicolon or misconfigured certificate. This was different. This was systemic collapse. At 11:28, I watched Victor being escorted toward the executive conference room. His stride had lost the rhythm it carried earlier. His confidence bled out of him, replaced by something like a stumble. He carried no coffee now, just the weight of consequences finally catching up. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Sarah. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it until the second buzz came with a message attached. "Ms. Craig, this is Ravenwell Legal. Please return to the building immediately. You are being reinstated as an emergency consultant. You will be compensated. You will have full access restored. Please respond yes." I stared at the words until the letters blurred. They were exactly what I had expected, exactly what I had prepared for. Victor had forced my hand, but in doing so, he had also given me leverage no one could deny. I sipped the last of my cold cappuccino and typed a single word. Yes. When I crossed the street again, the energy in the air felt electric, like a thunderstorm about to split the sky. Security at the lobby recognized me instantly. One of them stepped aside, tapping his earpiece. "She's here," he murmured, though he tried to keep it casual. The other nodded and gestured toward the waiting elevator. The ride up felt longer this time, as if the building itself were testing my patience. My reflection in the mirrored panel looked sharper than I remembered, my eyes clearer. I thought about the moment Victor had stood over me and ordered me to kill the system. I thought about the look on his face when I reminded him I had logged everything. He had not understood it then. He would understand soon. When the doors opened, Patricia was waiting. For the first time since I had known her, her blazer was wrinkled and a single strand of hair had slipped free from her immaculate bun. That told me everything. She was tired, furious, and under siege. "Thank you for coming," she said. No preamble, no small talk, just relief thinly disguised as authority. "I told him," I replied, my voice steady. "I know, come with me." Conference room A was a war zone. Laptops covered the mahogany table, screens littered with red error codes. Coffee cups sat abandoned, papers scattered like fallen leaves. The room buzzed with urgency. At the head sat David Reynolds, our CEO, granite-faced and silent. To his right was Richard Brennan, whose glare could have cut glass. Meridian's legal team flanked the other side of the table, while Ravenwell's lawyers huddled near the corner, whispering frantically. At the far end sat Victor, looking both defiant and hollowed out, his tie crooked, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might shatter his own teeth. David's voice filled the room. MS Craig, thank you for joining us. We need to understand exactly what happened this morning. Brennan slammed his hand flat on the table. Understand, my platform is dead. 500 million in transactions frozen, the SEC breathing down my neck. Somebody had better explain why. Victor seized the opening. This was a technical failure. Evangeline was responsible for maintaining. Stop, I said. My voice cut through the chaos, firm but calm. Every head turned toward me. I connected my phone to the large screen at the front of the room. A log appeared, crisp and undeniable. Here are the facts, I said. At 9:22 a.m., Victor Hale approached my desk and ordered me to shut down my workstation. I warned him this would disconnect the Meridian live feed. He insisted. At 9:23, I sent him an email requesting written confirmation, explicitly stating the consequences. He refused to confirm in writing but repeated his verbal order. At 9:24, under direct command and threat of termination, I executed the shutdown. The system has been down since. Gasps rippled through the room. Brennan leaned forward, his voice ice. You're telling me your head of department ordered you to disconnect the system 90 minutes before launch? That is exactly what I am telling you. Victor's face flushed crimson. She is twisting the truth. She was insubordinate, constantly undermining me. By warning you of risks, Patricia cut in, her voice like steel. Because I've seen her assessments, I read one myself this week. I pulled up the document. Here is the risk assessment I sent him on Tuesday. 3 critical dependencies highlighted. I suggested backup coverage. His reply, stop creating problems where none exist. The room went silent. Brennan's knuckles whitened on the table's edge. So my $500 million platform went down because your department head ignored his engineer's warnings and fired her 90 minutes before launch. Yes, I said. David's jaw tightened. Victor tried to rally. She is lying. She sabotaged the system deliberately. How? I asked calmly. By following your order, which you repeated twice in front of multiple witnesses with an audit log recording the entire exchange. Jennifer Wright, head of our legal team, spoke for the first time. We have audio, email, witnesses, and her performance record has been spotless for 3 years. She turned to Victor, her pen scratching across her pad. Do you deny you gave that order? Victor opened his mouth. No words came. Richard Brennan stood so suddenly his chair scraped against the floor. I want him fired today, and I want her rehired with a raise and an apology. Otherwise, Meridian pulls its entire contract and sues you for $500 million in damages. Victor sputtered. You can't. I just did, Brennan snapped. His voice carried the weight of someone used to ending conversations with a sentence. David looked at Patricia, then at me, then back at Victor. His verdict was quiet, but it rang louder than a shout. Victor, you're suspended pending investigation. Clean out your desk, security will escort you. Victor's face turned the color of a bruise, his eyes flicked to me, filled with a kind of desperate hatred. You planned this, he whispered. No, I replied. You did, the moment you decided competence was a threat. Security moved forward. Victor rose, stumbling over his chair. He did not look back as he was led out. When the door closed behind him, I turned to the table. Now about restoring the system. I will need full administrative access, a team of 3 engineers, and 2.5 hours without interruption. Brennan leaned across the table. You can do it? Yes, but first we need to discuss my consulting rate. Patricia exhaled, the ghost of a smile flickering across her lips. Name your price. Triple my previous hourly rate, I said, plus a written apology, plus a guarantee that today's termination is expunged from all records. Done, David said immediately. I nodded. Then let's get to work. When you have spent long enough inside a machine, you start to hear its rhythm even when you are standing outside of it. That morning, after the conference room had quieted, after Victor had been escorted away like a man who had just discovered the limits of his power, I walked back to the corner cafe with the blue awning. It was not retreat. It was strategy. From the booth where I had sat earlier, I could see the glass walls of Ravenwell's 12th floor. The chaos had not subsided. People still moved like panicked fish in an aquarium, darting left and right in bursts of nervous energy. But this time I wasn't watching as an exile. I was watching as someone who had just been called back into the war. Marcus set another cappuccino beside me without asking. Long day already, he said. It isn't even noon, I replied. He leaned against the counter, arms folded. And yet you look like someone who's already fought 3 battles. He wasn't wrong. I opened my laptop again, privacy screen angled just so. My fingers hovered above the keyboard before finally waking the device. The folder was still there, waiting for me like a locked drawer full of secrets. Audit logs, emails, screenshots, recordings, proof. I stared at the files for a long moment, then closed the lid again. This wasn't the time to unleash them. Timing mattered. Evidence was only as powerful as the moment you chose to reveal it. At 11:55, my phone buzzed with another message from Patricia. We are moving into stabilization. Brennan wants hourly updates. Legal is preparing documentation. Stay alert. I typed back one word: always. The truth was, I had already anticipated this stage of the crisis. Victor had been reckless, yes, but he was also cunning enough to cover his tracks where he could, and men like him never acted alone. There would be allies. There would be footprints in the sand leading away from the scene, so I waited. And while I waited, I thought about the moment when Victor had ordered me to kill the system. The sheer arrogance of believing I would carry the blame forever. The way his voice had trembled only once, just once, when I reminded him I was logging his command. That tremor had told me something. Fear, not fear of failure, not fear of Meridian, fear of exposure. I lifted the cappuccino to my lips and let the foam coat my tongue. Across the street, the building seemed to pulse again. For a moment, I almost pitied them, the ones still running through those halls, trying to contain a fire that had been deliberately lit. Almost. My laptop hummed softly when I opened it again. This time, I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed, Timeline of events, September 12. Beneath it, I listed the moments as they had unfolded, crisp and clean, no embellishment. 9:19 a.m., all indicators green. 9:20 a.m., Victor approaches desk. 9:22 a.m., verbal order to shut down workstation. 9:23 a.m., email requesting confirmation sent. 9:24 a.m., shutdown executed under direct order. 9:25 a.m., termination effective. I kept going, walking out. Cafe booth, messages from Sarah, arrival of Patricia, arrival of Meridian Legal. Brennan, the call back. The conference room confrontation. Victor's removal, my reinstatement, every entry neat, every fact verifiable. I saved the file twice, once on the encrypted drive, once on the external. I didn't need to look at the folder full of evidence. I knew it was there. That knowledge alone was enough to steady me. The cafe was warm and smelled of roasted beans and buttered croissants, but my mind was cold, precise. I replayed Victor's face in my memory, the way he had said the words effective immediately with too much force. The way his eyes had flickered toward the conference room blinds before he repeated himself. He hadn't been improvising. He had been following a script, which meant someone else had written it. The thought sent a chill down my spine. I glanced at the glass facade again. This time, instead of panic, I saw something else. A shadow of intent moving beneath the obvious chaos. I opened the audit logs once more and traced the pattern of the shutdown. There, hidden among the flood of warnings and alerts, was a single anomaly. A background request sent to a server outside of our normal environment. A blip so small most engineers would have ignored it, but I didn't. My fingers tapped quickly, pulling up the metadata. The request had originated at 9:25, exactly when I executed the shutdown, and it wasn't random. It had a destination, an external IP address I didn't recognize. I copied it down, my pulse quickening. Victor hadn't just been trying to get rid of me, he'd been trying to open a door. I closed the laptop and leaned back, staring at my reflection in the cafe window. The twist was clear now. The shutdown wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning, and I was the only one who had seen the door swing open. I stayed in that booth, watching the office like a hawk perched on a city ledge. Every movement was meaningful. A shadow flickering across a monitor, a hand pausing over a keyboard, someone muttering into a phone. They all whispered secrets if you knew how to listen. And I did. I had spent years learning to read not just systems, but the people who ran them. By noon, the chaos inside Ravenwell had started to show cracks in its rhythm. Engineers tripped over each other in their rush to restore connections. Executives barked instructions that contradicted each other. Lawyers scurried with folders stuffed with emergency protocols. The room was alive with panic, a living organism out of balance. I opened my secure laptop again and accessed the evidence I had collected over the last few hours. Each file, each log, each recording was a small thread. Alone, they were insignificant. Together, they formed a tapestry of deliberate negligence and intent. I traced the shutdown command once more, replaying Victor's voice and my own responses. It was like watching a chess game I had already won, but had only now revealed the strategy to myself. Then I noticed the anomaly again, the external request triggered at the moment of shutdown. It was subtle, almost hidden like a whisper beneath the roar of the collapsing system. I pulled the metadata, tracing every hop, every handshake. It led to a vendor server supposedly used for minor backups, but the signature didn't match. It was someone else's hand entirely. Someone with access to Victor's office, someone with enough knowledge to manipulate the system without raising immediate alarms. I leaned back in my chair, letting the realization sink in. The shutdown had been more than a power play against me. It had been a doorway, a test, a probe, and the hand that had sent that request could have been anywhere, waiting for the next opportunity. My phone buzzed. Patricia again. We have a temporary workspace ready. Brennan insists on full updates every hour. Legal wants a secure feed. Are you ready? I typed a single word, almost. The cafe was buzzing with ordinary life outside, students, tourists, city workers. None of them knew the war unfolding a block away. That was exactly how it should be. Knowledge is power and timing is everything. I began drafting a plan, not yet for execution, but for preparation. First, I would map every access point, every unusual request, every communication that had occurred in the last 48 hours. Then I would build a secure channel to relay updates to Patricia and the temporary stabilization team. Each piece would be logged and timestamped. Each action I took would be traceable, defensible, undeniable. I thought about Victor again. He had believed himself untouchable. He had assumed that ordering a shutdown under threat of termination would eliminate any chance I had to fight back. But he had underestimated the simplest fact. I had seen it all, and I had remembered it all. Every mistake, every oversight, every crack in his confidence, meticulously logged and stored. The twist, I realized, was not that I had survived. The twist was that I had been preparing all along. While Victor thought he was closing doors, he had opened one for me. And through that door, I would step when the time was right. I took another sip of cappuccino, letting the warmth steady me. Across the street, Ravenwell's 12th floor shimmered in the sunlight, a hive of frantic energy. I smiled slightly. They had no idea what was coming. I opened a fresh document and began to write a timeline that included everything: commands, confirmations, audio logs, timestamps, anomalies. I labeled each item with color codes and priority. By the time I finished, I had a full picture of not just what had happened, but what could happen next. It was only a matter of time before the evidence would speak louder than Victor ever could. And when it did, I would be ready. The system's hum was gone. In its place was a silence that throbbed in the veins of Ravenwell. What had been a meticulously constructed machine for processing billions of transactions in near real time now lay dormant, flatlined, like a patient whose heart had stopped mid-sentence. From my booth across the street, I watched as panic unfolded in layers. People moved like insects in a jar. Engineers raced from one workstation to another, checking error logs, muttering curses under their breath. Executives barked contradictory orders. Phones rang continuously, the shrill tones slicing through the hum of fluorescent lights. The company had been caught flat-footed. And in that moment, the city seemed oblivious, indifferent, as if nothing in the world mattered more than the swirl of pedestrians outside. I sipped my coffee and let the scene sink in. 1,000 threads of possibility stretched out before me, and all I had to do was trace them carefully. Every movement, every misstep, every misjudged instruction Victor had made was evidence. At noon, a series of alerts pinged on my phone. Sarah, Patricia, and the temporary stabilization team had begun their emergency coordination. Platform non-responsive, the first message read. Meridian flagged outage. Board expects immediate action. Legal prepping statement. I did not respond immediately. Observing was as important as acting. I zoomed my camera on the 13th floor servers through the reflective windows. Red lights flashed sporadically, each one a signal of failure, each one a marker in the chaos. By 12:15, the board members had arrived. Faces pale, jaws tight, eyes darting. They had flown in from different time zones, all converging on the building to witness the fallout. Meridian executives were there too, their expressions taut with disbelief and anger. "Where is Evangeline Craig?" Brennan's voice came over the speaker system, cutting through the room like a blade. "She is en route," Patricia replied, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. I checked the logs once more, confirming every detail of the shutdown, every timestamp aligned, every anomaly documented. Evidence was power, and at this moment it was my shield. Inside the building, Victor attempted damage control. He called engineers, gave orders, tried to restore confidence. But panic does not respond to arrogance. It responds to authority backed by knowledge and execution. He had neither. At 12:30, I opened my laptop and began mapping a response. Step 1, stabilize communication channels. Step 2, restore critical nodes. Step 3, isolate any suspicious external access. Step 4, implement backup procedures. Every action had to be deliberate, documented, and fail-safe. The next 30 minutes were a blur. Engineers moved like shadows, carrying wires, rebooting systems, checking security protocols. I coordinated silently, sending encrypted instructions to my team. Every minute counted. Every second misused could cost millions, perhaps billions. Meanwhile, Brennan's office became a hub of controlled panic. Legal teams prepared statements for the media. Executives whispered about potential lawsuits. The weight of the world pressed against the conference room walls. I leaned back and surveyed the chaos. Victor sat at the far end of the table, his posture rigid, eyes darting, a man out of depth in a storm he had brewed. He had tried to control everything, yet now he was powerless. By 1:00 p.m., preliminary stabilization efforts began to show results. Key nodes came online. Alerts turned from red to amber. The system hummed faintly, a heartbeat returning after a flatline. I allowed myself a small, private smile. This was the moment when preparation met opportunity. Every log I had kept, every detail documented, every anomaly I had noticed, all of it was paying off. Victor's plan to eliminate me, to create chaos and cover his tracks, had failed spectacularly. But the deeper currents were not yet revealed. The external request that had appeared during the shutdown remained a mystery. I traced its path again, cross-referencing access logs and firewall activity. The footprint was faint, subtle, but unmistakable. Someone had tried to probe our system during the crisis. Victor's actions had provided a window for another player. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the building across the street. The team inside thought they were reacting to chaos. What they did not know was that every movement I made, every command I sent, was laying the groundwork for a revelation that would change everything. At 1:30, Patricia called again. "Evangeline, the board is asking for updates every 10 minutes. Meridian is watching. You need to decide, do we present the partial recovery or hold until full stabilization?" I considered the question carefully. Timing was crucial. Too soon and the client would see the cracks. Too late and we might miss the chance to turn the narrative. "Partial recovery," I replied finally. "We present controlled progress. Keep the system online but isolated. Prepare for a full update in 30 minutes. Document every intervention." She hesitated, then nodded. "Understood." I opened a new document and began drafting the communication. Every word mattered. Every phrase could influence perception, could shift blame, could protect the company and its clients. I wrote with precision, clarity, and authority, knowing that the narrative now belonged to me as much as it belonged to anyone else. By 1:45, the system was semi-stable. Green lights returned gradually across monitors. Engineers reported fewer anomalies. Panic had shifted into cautious optimism, yet I knew better. The real battle was not in stabilizing what was broken. The real battle was in uncovering the truth hidden beneath the chaos. Victor had been reckless, arrogant, and short-sighted, but he had not acted alone. Someone had orchestrated elements that even he might not have foreseen. That someone's footprints were faint, almost invisible, but they existed, and I intended to follow them. I looked out the window one last time before returning to the building. The city carried on, oblivious to the storm. Traffic flowed, sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, pedestrians hurried past, coffee in hand, unaware of the digital battle that had just unfolded in the glass hive across the street. I smiled. Let them be oblivious. Knowledge is power, and I held more of it than anyone realized. By 2:00 p.m., the initial stabilization efforts had taken hold. Amber lights flickered green, error messages decreased, and the room inside Ravenwell seemed to inhale for the first time since the crisis began. My team had become a coordinated force, moving as one, each step documented, every action verified. I felt a rare sense of calm amidst the storm, knowing that control had returned, but only partially. The system was breathing again, but the threat lingered. I opened the secure folder and traced the external request one more time. The path was intricate but not impossible to follow. Every hop, every handshake, every unusual data packet built a trail. The request had been subtle, almost invisible, but the fingerprints were there. Victor had left it exposed, a moment of negligence I could exploit. Patricia approached me, her expression a mixture of relief and urgency. "The board wants continuous updates. Meridian is pressing for explanations. How long until full stabilization?" "Another 30 minutes," I said. We can bring the entire platform online safely, with integrity verified across all nodes, but we need to isolate the external anomalies before full exposure. She nodded and left to relay the instructions. I returned to my laptop, double-checking every node, ensuring the integrity of each backup, and preparing for the final phase of recovery. Every command I issued was mirrored, logged, and encrypted. The precision mattered. One misstep now could undo hours of careful work. Inside Ravenwell, Victor had been removed, but his shadow lingered. Emails sent before his departure contained subtle instructions, incomplete protocols, and misdirected commands. I traced each one, identifying the gaps and correcting them. My hands moved quickly, almost automatically, the rhythm of years of experience guiding me. By 2:20 p.m., the system had stabilized fully. Green lights adorned the dashboards across the main monitors. Alerts had stopped flashing. Servers hummed steadily, and the network was synchronized once more. I allowed myself a moment to breathe. The immediate crisis was over. The launch could proceed safely, and our clients would be none the wiser, at least for now. But the deeper mystery remained. The external request during the shutdown was not random. Someone had probed the system while it was vulnerable, a ghost moving through digital corridors. Whoever it was, they had intended to exploit the chaos, and their identity was hidden beneath layers of code and obfuscation. I pulled up the metadata again, tracing the IP, examining access logs, and cross-referencing unusual activity. Patterns emerged, small inconsistencies that indicated a skilled hand. Someone had anticipated the shutdown, someone with intimate knowledge of the network. Victor's arrogance had created the opening, but he was not the only player. My phone buzzed with another message from Sarah. System stable. Client reports progress. Legal wants a briefing on anomalies. Patricia requests your presence in the war room. I typed back a single word, coming. The elevator ride felt short, almost unreal. When the doors opened, I stepped into the war room where Patricia, David, and the remaining executives were assembled. The atmosphere was tense but controlled. Relief had tempered the panic, and yet eyes flicked toward me, acknowledging the fact that the outcome of the crisis rested entirely on my shoulders. Ms. Craig, David said, voice calm but firm, the system is stable. Meridian is monitoring closely. What is your assessment? I placed my laptop on the table, opening the secure logs and highlighting the anomalies. The platform is stable. Clients can continue operations, but there is evidence of an external request during the shutdown. It was subtle, almost undetectable, but it exists. Whoever initiated it could have had access to sensitive operations. Brennan leaned forward, eyes sharp. Are you saying someone used Victor's shutdown as an opportunity to probe the system? Yes, I replied. It's possible, and we need to treat it as a serious threat until we can verify its source and intent. Patricia's eyes met mine. Do you need additional resources to investigate? I have the team I need, I said. We will isolate the suspicious activity, verify system integrity, and prepare a report for legal and client review. But we must act quickly. Any delay gives them an advantage. David nodded, appreciation clear in his expression. Do it, and keep me updated every 15 minutes. I turned back to my laptop and began isolating the external traces, carefully reconstructing the path of the anomalous request. It was meticulous work, requiring patience and precision. Each step brought new understanding. Each discovery tightened the noose around whoever had tried to exploit Victor's negligence. By 2:50 p.m., the system was fully operational, the external probes identified, and the network secured. The board and Meridian executives received a controlled update detailing stabilization efforts and the system's return to full functionality. Confidence returned slowly but noticeably. I leaned back in my chair for a moment, letting the adrenaline fade. The immediate crisis had passed, but the battle was not over. Victor had been a catalyst, but the deeper threat, the one masked beneath digital smoke and mirrors, remained, and I intended to uncover it. This was the turning point. The collapse had exposed vulnerabilities, but it had also revealed opportunities. And as I watched the city through the war room's glass, I knew the next phase of the story was about to begin. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped onto the executive floor with a calmness that belied the storm that had raged earlier. The floor smelled faintly of burnt coffee, polished leather, and panic fading into organized chaos. My box from the morning was left in the corner. The cactus sat upright, resilient, much like I felt inside. Patricia met me at the hall. "Welcome back," she said quietly, not a greeting, a warning. She knew this was the moment that would set everything in motion. "I never left," I replied, matching her tone. Inside the war room, the executives were gathered again, more subdued than during the collapse. A few lawyers hovered near the perimeter, hands clasped over folders. Brennan leaned back in his chair, fingers interlocked, eyes narrowing in calculated appraisal. David Reynolds observed quietly, watching for cues, measuring the air before moving. Victor Hale had been removed from the room, but his influence lingered, like a ghost refusing to leave the building. I set up my laptop on the table, connecting it to the large display. The logs, screenshots, and recorded audio filled the screen. Every entry, every timestamp, every action documented, creating a map of events that left no room for ambiguity. "Ms. Craig," David began, "the board has authorized your full access for stabilization. What do you need to proceed?" I took a breath and let the room feel the weight of my gaze. Full administrative access restored, my team on standby, and uninterrupted time to complete the reinitialization and verification of all critical systems. I also require confirmation that all previous orders from Victor that compromised the platform are voided, and that legal acknowledges my reinstatement with immediate effect. Patricia leaned forward. "All conditions accepted. Victor's orders have been suspended. You are effectively in command for the next operation." I nodded, knowing this was not just about restoring the system. It was about controlling the narrative, about shaping the truth before it could be distorted further. The engineers I had requested arrived swiftly, Sarah, Kumar, and James. They set up workstations, laptops flickering to life, monitors reflecting green lines of hope. My instructions were precise, almost surgical. Step 1, verify system integrity. Step 2, reestablish live connections with Meridian. Step 3, isolate any irregular external traffic. Step 4, prepare a timeline report for legal and board review. Step 5, monitor every subsystem for anomalies. By 2:30, the platform hummed steadily. Errors dwindled. Alerts turned from red to amber to green. The live feed resumed, flowing like a river returning to its banks. I turned to Brennan, who had been observing silently. "The system is stable," I said. "Clients can resume operations with confidence. Any issues we encounter will be documented immediately. However, during the initial shutdown, there was an external request attempting to access the system. That has been contained and traced. We are investigating its origin." His lips pressed together, a subtle acknowledgement of both relief and concern. "You've not only restored the platform, but you've identified a potential threat. Impressive." I allowed a small smile. "It's only the beginning." Patricia leaned over, handing me a secure folder. "All the documentation you requested. Logs, internal emails, timestamps, everything Victor tried to hide is here." I flipped through the contents quickly, mentally noting the patterns, the inconsistencies, the gaps Victor had left. He had been sloppy, overconfident, and completely unaware that his moves had been recorded and preserved. By 3:00 p.m., I had assembled a complete picture. Not only was the system safe, but the groundwork for exposing Victor's broader misconduct was now firmly in place. Every improper order, every attempt to cover his negligence, every irregular vendor contact, all meticulously logged. David watched me, expression unreadable. "And what about Victor?" I paused. "He will face the consequences of his actions. But right now, my priority is the system and the clients. Once stabilized, the investigation into his misconduct will proceed without obstruction." Brennan nodded. "Do what you need, we trust you." And in that moment, I felt the shift. The power in the room had moved from fear and reaction to competence and authority. I was no longer just an employee. I was the person everyone relied upon, the one who had saved them from catastrophe. I turned back to the monitors, watching green lines stabilize across the dashboards. It was more than recovery. It was a demonstration of precision and control. Every anomaly was accounted for, every vulnerability secured, and every possible exploit contained. Patricia whispered, "This is more than just a system save. You've given the company its life back." I smiled faintly. "It's not about saving the company. It's about showing that systems, processes, and accountability matter more than anyone's ego. Victor will learn that soon enough." The next 30 minutes passed in controlled execution. My team followed orders flawlessly, documentation grew with each update, and the board received detailed, verified reports. Meridian's representatives received controlled communication confirming stabilization, enough to reassure but not to reveal all details yet. By 3:45, the crisis was visibly contained. The executives relaxed slightly, though tension still lingered. Legal had copies of every document. Every communication was archived. The platform was functional, secure, and fully monitored. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the room settle around me. Victor had set the stage for chaos, but in trying to eliminate me, he had handed me the power to rewrite the outcome. And rewrite it I had. The first phase of the return was complete. The platform was safe. The team was in place. The evidence of misconduct was collected. And the next phase, exposing the deeper conspiracy, was waiting, silent, patient, ready for the moment I would pull it into the light. By 4:00 p.m., the platform was fully operational. Every system node was verified, redundancies tested, live feeds monitored, and anomalies neutralized. The room had settled into a rhythm of controlled precision. Engineers whispered to each other, checking their logs against mine, confirming every action. I could feel the tension in the room dissolve, replaced by a cautious optimism. I stood and addressed the team. We've restored the platform. Clients can resume normal operations, but this is not the end. There are irregularities we discovered during the shutdown: external requests, unusual server pings, and minor but deliberate misconfigurations. These must be investigated thoroughly before the board considers the issue closed. Patricia nodded. We've archived all logs. Legal has copies. Meridian has been updated. You have full authority for the investigation. I allowed a small smile. Good. Let's make sure there's no ambiguity about who is responsible for what happened today. David Reynolds, CEO, finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. Evangeline, your actions today have saved the company from disaster, but the board wants assurance that nothing similar can happen again. They want you to lead the full post-crisis review and implement safeguards. You will have all necessary authority. I nodded. I will need access to all internal communication logs, access requests, and vendor interactions over the past 6 months. We need to understand if Victor acted alone or if there was a pattern of negligence. Brennan interjected, his tone measured. And what about Victor? The board expects accountability. He cannot remain in a position of authority. I agree, I said. But first, the company and our clients must be stabilized. Investigation into Victor's misconduct can follow in parallel, ensuring all findings are documented, secure, and verifiable. The room quieted. Everyone understood. Victor's arrogance had opened the door, but the real work belonged to me now. At 4:30, the engineers and I moved into a temporary secure workspace. Screens lined the walls, displaying logs, alerts, and system maps. Every anomaly, every irregularity was cross-checked, traced, and documented. My fingers flew over the keyboard as I recreated the sequence of events, verified external probes, and reconstructed internal communication threads. By 5:15, we had a complete map of the day's crisis. What failed, why it failed, how it was exploited, and most importantly, how it was corrected. Every action had been logged, every decision recorded, and every intervention timed precisely. I called Patricia into the room. I've traced the external request to a vendor server. The IP is masked, but the pattern indicates a deliberate attempt to exploit the shutdown window. This was not random. Her eyes widened slightly. You think Victor wasn't acting alone? I don't know yet, I admitted, but I intend to find out. Just then, the door opened, and David Reynolds entered. Victor wants to speak with you, he said calmly. He has requested a meeting under supervision. The board insists you hear him out before taking further action. I looked at him, then at Patricia. Supervised or not, he has nothing left. I will hear him, but the conversation will be about accountability and evidence, nothing else. By 5:45, Victor was escorted into the secure workspace. He looked smaller than he had this morning, his posture defeated yet stubborn, like a man who refuses to bow even when he has no choice. Evangeline, he began, voice strained, I can explain. You don't understand. Stop, I said firmly. I understand perfectly. You ordered the shutdown, you caused the collapse, and you attempted to conceal your actions. Every step is documented, time-stamped, and logged. You will answer to the board, legal, and now me. His lips pressed together, anger and fear battling behind his eyes. I will not allow your arrogance to harm this company any longer, I interrupted. You had your chance. The evidence is mine. I control the narrative now. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, defeated, he slumped slightly in the chair, realizing the game was over. I turned to Patricia and David. The company is stabilized. Clients are informed. Evidence of misconduct is secured. The next step is a formal investigation into all irregularities, including Victor's actions and any external parties involved. Patricia nodded. Agreed, we will follow your lead. I exhaled, letting the tension drain from my shoulders. The first phase of return was complete. The system was alive, the team empowered, and Victor neutralized. But I knew the deeper conspiracy was still waiting to be uncovered. As Victor was escorted out again, I returned to the screens, scanning for anomalies, tracing every footprint left behind, preparing for the next battle. The crisis had been managed, but the war for accountability, truth, and security was only beginning, and I was ready. By the morning after the system's restoration, I had settled into a rhythm of controlled observation. While Ravenwell's executives were relieved, the traces I had noticed during the shutdown continued to whisper of deeper intentions. The external request, the subtle anomalies, and the unusual patterns of access suggested more than incompetence or simple sabotage. They hinted at collusion. I began by retracing the network logs, packet by packet, hop by hop. Every external connection, every vendor ping, every irregular authentication was examined meticulously. My team followed my instructions silently, aware that each piece of evidence we uncovered could reveal something larger than anyone had anticipated. Patricia entered with a tablet in hand. Evangeline, we've received preliminary reports from legal. They're concerned about unusual vendor activity. Have you found anything? Yes, I replied without looking up. But it's bigger than vendor anomalies. There are fingerprints here suggesting coordination with an external entity. This was not Victor acting alone. I expanded a network map on the main display, highlighting suspicious connections and the timeline of events during the shutdown. Notice these access attempts, I said. They coincide precisely with Victor's order. They were triggered by the system going offline. Someone was waiting for that window. Kumar pointed to one of the flagged IPs. This traces back to a proxy network used by one of our partnered vendors, but the signature doesn't match their standard requests. It's too precise, too clean. Someone knew exactly when and where to strike. I nodded. Exactly. This isn't random. This is a deliberate attempt to exploit our vulnerability during a time they knew we would be most compromised, and the patterns suggest inside knowledge of Victor's actions. Brennan, on a secure video call, leaned forward. So, are you saying this is corporate espionage? It looks that way, I said, but it's more than that. Victor's shutdown was just a piece of the puzzle. Someone wanted to gain access to sensitive operational data, and the shutdown gave them a window. Patricia tapped her pen against the table. If Victor was only following orders, that makes him complicit but not the mastermind. You think someone else is behind this? Yes, I said, and we need to find them before they can cover their tracks. Every misstep they make leaves a trace, and I intend to follow it. I split the logs into separate threads for closer examination, cross-referencing with vendor contracts, unusual authorization requests, and past internal errors that had been dismissed as coincidence. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Small manipulations of access rights, discrepancies in approval signatures, requests sent during off-peak hours, always aligning with Victor's scheduled absences. See this, I said, pointing to a set of email headers. The sender appears to be Victor, but the encryption key doesn't match his standard digital signature. Whoever sent these had access to his credentials or knew exactly how to mimic them. Sarah leaned over my shoulder. That means someone inside the company is coordinating with an external actor, someone who understands both our infrastructure and Victor's behavior. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the realization settle. Victor had been reckless, yes, but he had been a pawn. The real threat was someone using his arrogance to their advantage. I traced the anomalies further, comparing them to historical access logs. A vendor engineer who had been quietly removed from active projects months ago showed traces of irregular logins, attempts to access archived system files, and interactions with proxy networks. Someone had been testing vulnerabilities, probing the defenses without triggering alarms. Patricia's eyes narrowed. So, Victor may have set the trap, but someone else built the snare. Exactly, I said, and now we have the evidence to expose it, but we need to be methodical. If we act too soon, the external actor could vanish. If we wait too long, they could access more sensitive data. I mapped out the investigative steps on the display. Isolate all external probes, validate internal credentials, compare metadata with approved access logs, and reconstruct every sequence of communication. Every action would be documented, time-stamped, and secured. By mid-afternoon, the traces led me to an external corporate entity. They had coordinated their probes with internal anomalies, timing everything with precision to Victor's shutdown. The fingerprints were subtle but unmistakable. Someone had intended to exploit the chaos for financial gain, targeting our most sensitive operational systems. I leaned back, letting the scope of it sink in. Victor's plan had been to eliminate me and assert control, but in doing so, he had inadvertently opened a window for a far larger conspiracy, and through meticulous analysis, I had found it. "Evangeline," Patricia said softly, "what do we do now?" I looked at her, calm, precise, and measured. "We contain it, document it, and expose it. Victor is just one piece. The real threat lies in the external coordination, and I intend to follow it to the end." At 4:30 p.m., I initiated the next phase, tracking every lead, securing evidence, and preparing for the moment when we would confront the mastermind. This was no longer about saving a system. This was about exposing a network of deceit, about ensuring that those who tried to exploit the company and its clients could be held accountable. The room felt silent for a moment, heavy with anticipation. Every face understood. We were no longer reacting. We were controlling the narrative, and the story was about to reach its most critical chapter. The next morning, before the city had fully awakened, I was back in the secure workspace. The hum of the servers felt different now, no longer a noise I tolerated but a language I understood, each pulse and flicker telling me where to look. Overnight, my team and I had compiled a mountain of data. Every anomalous access, every forged credential, every suspicious packet traced and cataloged. At 6:45 a.m., I began assembling the threads into a single narrative. The logs read like a crime story. One Victor had started, but someone else had written. His orders had been the bait, the shutdown had been the trap, but the real hand behind it was the external actor who had waited for the moment the system went dark to slip inside. Patricia entered, hair still damp from an early shower, carrying 2 coffees. "You've been here all night," she said softly. "There's no time to waste," I replied. "We're close." I projected the network map onto the main display. Overnight, we had cracked the masked IP addresses. The probes all pointed back to a shell corporation registered in Switzerland, a firm that on paper handled minor infrastructure consulting for a competitor of Meridian. But the connection didn't stop there. Within the metadata of each probe were signatures belonging to a former Ravenwell engineer, now working quietly for that shell firm. "They built the snare," I said. "Victor's ego gave them the opening, but they set the stage months ago. Look at these patterns." They mimicked his credentials, inserted subtle misconfigurations into vendor requests, and timed the final access attempt to the second I executed the shutdown. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "You can prove this." "Yes. Logs, encryption keys, access timelines, every detail, it's airtight." Brennan joined the call from his office, his voice sharp but measured. "Do you have names?" I zoomed in on the data signatures. The external shell company is called Alpine Vector Consulting. Its lead infrastructure engineer is Marcus Delacroix. He left Ravenwell 18 months ago after a dispute with Victor over security protocols. He has been quietly siphoning vendor credentials ever since. Brennan's lips tightened. So Victor fired the one person who was trying to tighten the locks, then used his departure to justify cutting corners, and Marcus used that negligence to build a backdoor into our systems. "Exactly," I said. And when Victor ordered the shutdown to sabotage me, Marcus was ready. He attempted to extract sensitive data in the window Victor created. He would have succeeded if not for the logs and countermeasures I'd built. Patricia let out a slow breath. "You've been documenting this from the start." "Yes," I said. "Victor underestimated me. Marcus underestimated me. They thought competence was just code and servers. They forgot competence is also preparation." Brennan's voice hardened. "We go public?" "Not yet," I said. "We lock down every channel Marcus could use, revoke every credential tied to his proxies, secure all evidence, and prepare a formal legal action. Then we confront him and Victor simultaneously. If we move too soon, Marcus will vanish." Patricia nodded. "And Victor? He'll confess once he sees what's waiting for him. His arrogance will force him to talk." By 9:00 a.m., we had executed the lockdown. Vendor access revoked. Internal credentials reissued. Secure channels established. Every pathway Marcus could use was closed. At 10:15 a.m., I walked into the boardroom again, this time with a slim folder in my hand. Victor was there under supervision, his posture brittle but defiant. Brennan sat at the far end, legal teams flanking him like soldiers awaiting the signal to move. I placed the folder on the table and opened it slowly. Logs, signatures, emails, encrypted keys, all laid out in a clean, undeniable arc of evidence. This is the truth, I said quietly. Victor orchestrated the shutdown to remove me. Marcus Delacroix, now with Alpine Vector Consulting, exploited that shutdown to attempt data theft on behalf of a competitor. I have isolated every trace, locked down the system, and secured all evidence. This is no longer speculation. This is fact. The room was silent. Victor's face went pale. I didn't know about Marcus, he whispered. You didn't need to know, I replied. You just had to create the chaos. He counted on you to do that, and you delivered. Brennan leaned forward, eyes like flint. Legal will coordinate with Swiss authorities. Marcus will be extradited if possible. Victor, you're finished here. Your actions created this vulnerability. You will answer for it. Victor's shoulders sagged. For the first time, he looked like a man who understood the full weight of his decisions. I turned to the board. The system is secure. The perpetrators are identified. All evidence has been documented. We can prepare a public statement once legal approves. David Reynolds exhaled. You've saved this company twice in 2 days, Evangeline. I shook my head. I didn't save it. I just told the truth. The system is only as strong as the accountability behind it. Brennan nodded slowly. And now that accountability has a face. I gathered the folder and closed it. We'll draft the statement, coordinate with law enforcement, and begin rebuilding trust with our clients. But the story isn't over yet. Marcus is still out there, and he'll try to disappear. We need to move fast. Patricia smiled faintly, a glint of respect in her eyes. You've turned the game around. No, I said quietly. I've only started writing the ending. The boardroom was silent except for the hum of the servers returning to life. Outside, the city moved as if nothing had happened. Inside, the plot had been revealed, the conspiracy exposed, and the power shifted irreversibly. And as I walked out of the room, folder in hand, I knew the next chapter would not be about survival. It would be about justice. The morning light in New York had a cold clarity that seemed to strip away pretense. I arrived at Ravenwell Technologies not as an employee returning from exile, but as someone holding the culmination of every hour spent preparing, documenting, and securing the truth. The folder in my hand contained evidence so complete it left no room for argument. Every timestamp, every log, every digital footprint leading directly to Victor's reckless orders and Marcus Delacroix's calculated exploitation. The boardroom was quiet as I entered. David Reynolds was already present, seated at the head of the table, flanked by Patricia and our legal counsel. Brennan joined via secure video link, his eyes sharp as ever. I laid the folder on the table and opened it. This is the full record, I said, voice calm but precise. Victor's orders were executed at 9:24 a.m., creating a window that Marcus Delacroix exploited through Alpine Vector Consulting. Every attempt to access the system externally during the shutdown has been logged and secured. There is no ambiguity, no room for misinterpretation. Victor Hale sat at the far end, escorted by security. His shoulders slumped, his confident posture gone. For the first time, he looked like a man stripped bare of pretense. I didn't know Marcus would, he began, but the words fell flat. You didn't need to know, I interrupted. You created the opportunity. That is your responsibility. Your negligence set this in motion. Brennan leaned forward. Victor, you're suspended indefinitely. Legal will review your actions for accountability. Marcus, through Alpine Vector, is now the target of a formal investigation and will be held liable for corporate espionage and attempted data theft. Victor's lips pressed into a thin line. You've trapped me in this. No, I said. You trapped yourself, and Marcus thought he could exploit chaos to his advantage. Both of you underestimated the one person who always sees the whole board, the system, the people, and the consequences. Patricia stepped forward. All evidence has been cross-verified. Authorities have been notified. We have locked down all external access points. Marcus cannot act without leaving a trace. Victor will face internal disciplinary actions. The company, its clients, and its systems are secure. I closed the folder and placed it on the table, the sound final, almost ceremonial. This is the reckoning, I said. Accountability is no longer theoretical. It is factual, verifiable, and immediate. Every decision made, every action taken has been recorded and will stand in court if necessary. The boardroom was silent. Even Brennan, known for his sharp tongue and impatience, looked impressed. Victor's eyes darted to me. And what of my reputation? He asked quietly, defeated. I looked at him steadily. Reputation is what you earn through competence, integrity, and foresight. You have none of these. You gambled with systems, people, and trust, and lost. David Reynolds leaned back. Evangeline, you've not only stabilized the company, but you've also ensured that anyone attempting a similar act will think twice. You have rewritten the standards of accountability here. I nodded. That is the goal. Systems alone cannot protect a company. Competence, foresight, and integrity are the real shields. The system is just the canvas. The rest of the morning was spent coordinating with legal teams, drafting statements for Meridian, and preparing a detailed report for the board. Every action, every update, every decision I made was logged, ensuring that the narrative remained unassailable. By noon, the platform had resumed full operational capacity, clients were notified of a controlled restoration, and the anomalies had been contained. All critical systems were green. The immediate crisis was over. But the work of justice had only just begun. Marcus Delacroix, Alpine Vector Consulting, and all associated parties had been identified, and evidence was prepared for the authorities. Victor's suspension was confirmed. Internal controls were strengthened to prevent any future exploitation of similar vulnerabilities. I took a moment to lean against the conference room window, looking out at the city. The streets carried on, oblivious to the digital war that had raged above them. The people outside had no idea that a crisis had been contained, that accountability had been enforced, that the system, and the company, was safe because someone had seen the whole picture and acted with precision. I turned back to the room. This is more than just recovery, I said. This is accountability, clarity, and proof that competence matters more than power, ego, or opportunity. Today, we have not just survived a crisis. We have ensured that justice has a foundation. Patricia smiled faintly. And the company is stronger for it. Yes, I said. Stronger, safer, and finally aligned with the principle that those who hold power are responsible for every choice they make. That principle is now non-negotiable here. As the legal teams began filing copies, the executives continued reviewing the reports, and the engineers returned to routine monitoring, I knew the story was complete. Not in the sense of an ending, but in the sense of closure for the crisis. The reckoning had been delivered. The plot twist, the larger conspiracy behind the shutdown, had been exposed, and the company finally could move forward. I walked out of the conference room with the folder tucked under my arm, the weight of evidence a tangible reassurance. Outside, the city shimmered in the afternoon sun. I paused for a moment, letting the air fill my lungs, the hum of the servers and the city blending into a quiet symphony. Justice, accountability, and competence had won. And the last word, as always, belonged to the truth. The afternoon moved deliberately, each minute a measured step toward closure. With Victor suspended and Marcus identified for legal action, the immediate threats were neutralized. But I knew that the story required finality, not just in action, but in recognition, in accountability, and in the unshakable assertion of competence. I walked through the main floor, past the engineers monitoring the systems, past the lawyers collating evidence, past executives cautiously scanning the dashboards. Their eyes met mine with a mix of respect, relief, and something I could only describe as awe. They had witnessed a chain of events that could have destroyed the company, and yet here we were alive, intact, and stronger for it. Patricia joined me by the window. "You did it," she said softly, almost a whisper. I looked out over the city, skyscrapers reflecting sunlight like shards of glass, the streets alive with traffic, the people oblivious to the war that had been fought and won just above them. "We did it," I corrected. "This was never about me. It was about the system, about ensuring that decisions and power are accountable. That principle now holds here. That is the real victory." Inside the boardroom, the final reports were being reviewed. Each file meticulously documented the timeline, from Victor's reckless shutdown order to Marcus's attempted exploitation. Every piece of evidence had been verified, archived, and secured. Legal would have everything it needed to prosecute and prevent recurrence. I stepped back into the conference room for one last overview. The team awaited my instructions. Sarah, Kumar, and James had been invaluable, orchestrating the stabilization, tracking anomalies, and validating every move. Their trust had been earned, and their competence had made the difference. "Everything is stable," I said. "The systems are verified. The clients are informed. The internal logs are cross-checked. External threats are contained. Legal has the evidence for action against Marcus and Alpine Vector Consulting. Victor's actions have been recorded and will be addressed by the board." Brennan's face appeared on the screen again, calm now, but with a spark of respect. "You've not only stabilized the company, Evangeline, but you've demonstrated what true oversight looks like. The board recognizes your leadership today. You've set a standard no one here can ignore." I allowed a small smile. The standard was always there. It just required enforcement. David Reynolds stood. Evangeline, the board and executive leadership have voted unanimously to recognize your actions. Your reinstatement is permanent, your authority expanded to include oversight of all critical systems, and your recommendations for process improvements will be implemented immediately. I nodded, letting the weight of it sink in. It was more than reinstatement. It was acknowledgement, recognition, and the assurance that the chaos had not gone in vain. Victor sat quietly, defeated. He understood that no argument, no plea, no charm could undo the evidence. The room held him accountable, not because of malice, but because the truth had been meticulously documented and presented. Patricia whispered, "What now?" I looked at her, then at the room, at the city outside. Now we rebuild with integrity. Now we ensure that every system, every process, every decision is accountable. And now we make certain that anyone who underestimates competence understands that truth and preparation matter more than power and arrogance. The afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the conference room. I walked to the window, placing a hand on the glass. The city moved on, indifferent, unaware of the crisis it had just skirted, and that was fine. The work we had done mattered most here inside these walls where accountability had been restored. I turned back to the team. Take a moment. Reflect. This is more than a victory for the system. It is a victory for diligence, preparation, and foresight. We have not just survived a crisis, we have ensured justice and established the standard for every decision moving forward. For the first time that day, the room relaxed. Smiles appeared, hands unclenched, and the hum of the servers returned to a comfortable rhythm. I picked up the folder one last time. The evidence was complete, the system secure, the conspirators identified. Justice had been delivered not through theatrics, but through competence, preparation, and meticulous action. As I walked out of the boardroom, I felt a calm satisfaction settle in my chest. The crisis had passed. The conspiracy had been revealed. Accountability had been enforced. And finally, the company could move forward with confidence. Outside, the city was alive, oblivious to the digital war that had been won. I paused on the steps, letting the sunlight warm my face. The last word in this story was not fear, panic, or chaos, it was truth. Competence had triumphed. Integrity had prevailed. And for once, the city, the company, and I could all breathe.